Hello and welcome back to the Reapers. We're in our A-10A and we're going to look at takeoff and landing. Now this aircraft is an FC3 low fidelity model, so everything is pretty easy and simple. So what we're going to do is just hold on the wheel brakes, spool up to 100%. When the fans have spooled up to full, we're going to release the wheel brake. And then we're going to travel, and we're going to use our axis commands, our rudders, to keep us nice and center on the runway. We're going to rotate at about 120 knots, and we're going to rotate to an angle of 10 degrees up. We can use our pitch ladder, which you can see here, -5, -10. We're going to hold at 10 degrees until the bird takes off. Now, she'll take off when she's ready, basically. The actual takeoff speed will depend on the weight. So if she's very light, she'll take off at 120. If she's medium weight, we've got medium weight today, probably 130, 135, something like that. If it's heavy with stores, it could be anywhere up to about 150 knots. Now, it's important that once we've rotated to 10 degrees, don't pull any further, because we'll risk a tail strike, and it doesn't really help pull up. And it doesn't really help take off anyway if you pull up above more than 10 degrees. So stick to 10 degrees, be patient, and she'll take off when she's ready. We will need flaps, so we're going to look down here at our flap gauge, press the F key, and one touch gives 10 degrees, two touch 20 degrees, and back to 0. We just want 10 degrees for takeoff because we don't want too much drag. That's about it, so let's give it a shot. Brake on, full throttle, wait for the spool. And fans at max, and off we go. Speed is now in play because we're above 50 knots. (120) rotate. Look for 10 degrees. There we have 10 degrees. Our cross shows where we're aiming at the moment. G for gear up. Because she's a big slow bird, you're going to want to go pretty much full throttle until you've reached your cruising speed. Next, let's turn into a circuit. We're going to do a left-hand circuit. We want to maintain 1,000 feet AGL and 300 knots. Well, you're supposed to do 300 knots. This is a slow bird, obviously, so maybe we'll do about 250. Right, I'll catch up with you again on the downwind. Okay, we're on the downwind leg now of the circuit. So we've got our 1,000 feet or so and 250 knots, about the best we're going to get. So whenever you come in for a landing, for a visual landing like this, you're going to be coming in from a circuit like this. You won't come straight in. If you want to know more about circuits, please check out our educational general section. We've got a tutorial on circuits and how to do them there. So we're going to hold there. Now what we're going to do is extend downwind for a mile, maybe 2 miles, because we want to make the tutorial last. We're going to turn in on a base leg. We're going to turn left, and we're going to try and time that turn so that we roll out basically essentially level and in line on the runway course. We're going to use that turn to reduce our speed because we're fast from the circuit. We're about 300 knots. We're going to come off the power on that turn, and we want to come out of that turn at about 150 knots, something like that. Then we've got the approach. Now the approach speed to the runway is really going to depend on how much we weigh. Now always be careful when you read if you read the manual, it'll tell you an approach speed of probably like 120 knots or something like that. You just got to be really careful because that always assumes that you're in landing configuration, which means no stores or very light stores and very low fuel. We've got, for instance, absolutely full fuel here. We've got no stores, so we're about medium weight at the moment. So yet you can probably do an approach about 120 knots in landing configuration. Most time in DCS you probably won't be in landing configuration because you'll be in practice or a very short flight. So in this case, in a medium configuration like this, I'd like to see a approach speed of about 130 to 140 knots. If you're really heavy with stores, then you can go up to about 150 knots and she'll fly like that. Touchdown, basically you're going to feather and you're going to lose 10 to 20 knots on touchdown. So we're going to actually touch down roughly about 120 knots in our current weight configuration. Our approach wants to be approximately -3 degrees descent. However, because we're going to extend a little bit further than usual, I may use a slightly less descent, probably more like 2 degrees. So let's get on with it. Rising slightly, let's trim around. So let's extend for a couple of miles. Okay, I think that'll do us. So we're going to come off the power. Keep our path vector roughly on the horizon because we want to come out and join the final approach at about 1,000 feet. So what we keep doing is keep looking over our left shoulder and make sure that we roll out on the runway course. Keep an eye on our speed, make sure we don't get too slow. 1,000 feet is good. On the right there we can see. May have to tighten this turn just a little bit now to make sure we don't underturn, sorry. And there we go. Right, we're going to start descent now. Like I said, usually about 3 degrees, but because we've gone out an extra mile, we're about 2.5 degrees, maybe a tiny bit more. Right, we want to put our path vector, which is that there, which is where we're actually flying on the threshold of the runway. Our speed is going to, rather than using air brake, I'm just going to let that fall on its own. That's a gear warning. So G, gear down. And we want to start working our flaps down. Flaps stage 1 and flaps stage 2. So for the landing, we want full flaps and gear down. Our speed will continue to drop. I'm going to start adding power now to make sure we don't get too slow. We don't really want to go below 130 knots. Keep our path vector on the threshold of the runway. Check our altitude, 500 feet.
Altitude,
a bit awkward there. Yes, love, I know. Right, we're going to have to start introducing trim now because she's slow, I'm going to want to trim up, so I'm going to do so. I'm going to aim just for the threshold there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the speed of 130 until I'm just above the tarmac. Then I'm going to feather, I'm going to cut the engines, and just go for a smooth touchdown at a decent angle of attack. We've got an angle of attack meter, I should say, here. You've got, if you're too high or too low, you've got lights there and there. It's telling us that we're good AOA for landing at the moment. You can see our AOA is about 8 degrees at the moment, which, yeah, sounds about right. And looking good. If you do a good approach like that, then there's never any need to use an air brake. Off the throttle now, feather her out, and just stall her into the runway. There we go. Not the best, but not the worst. 115 knots or something like that landing. That's good. That's it, really. Pump the brakes until we've come to a stop. The only thing is, like I said, vary your approach based on your weight. The biggest mistake I see is either people rotating too eagerly and getting a tail strike, or just taking off too harshly. You shouldn't do that. Whoops, wasn't pumping. And people approaching too slow for their weight. So that's that, really. I hope that is helpful, and I'll see you later.